What really happens when a private phone call, one that was never meant to be heard, suddenly leaks to the world? And why does the reaction of someone closest to the situation become the most unsettling mystery of all? That night in Itaewon, the atmosphere felt no different from usual. Neon lights flickered, music blended with the hum of conversations, and in the middle of it all, Jungkook appeared at an event that seemed, at first glance, entirely ordinary. No one could have guessed that behind his faint smile, behind the calm demeanor he always carried in public, a moment was unfolding that would soon shake fans across the globe. Quietly, hidden, yet ultimately impossible to conceal. How did it happen? Who recorded it? And perhaps the most haunting question of all, what exactly was said in that conversation that could trigger such an unexpected reaction from Kim TAE? It all began with a short audio clip that suddenly surfaced across online platforms. There was no warning, no explanation, just a brief recording, yet enough to send hearts racing, enough to ignite a storm of speculation that quickly spiraled out of control. In that recording, Jungkook's voice sounded different, deeper, more serious. There were pauses between his words, as if every sentence carried a weight that was far from ordinary. Who was he talking to? Who was that message meant for? And why did his tone sound like someone standing on the edge of a major decision? Clues began to emerge piece by piece, but none offered clear answers. Some believed the call was tied to internal issues. Others speculated about hidden conflicts that had never been revealed to the public. Yet one detail stood out above all: the timing. Because at nearly the same moment, in a completely different place, something far more shocking was unfolding. At a training facility usually filled with energy, laughter, and relentless focus, Kim TAE showed a reaction no one had ever witnessed before. At first, nothing seemed unusual. He arrived as he always did, dressed for practice, greeting the staff, taking his position. But some who were present said there was something off. His gaze felt distant, his movements slightly delayed, as though his mind was somewhere else entirely. Then, as the music began to play, just as practice should have started, he stopped. Was it bitter? Was it disbelief? Or was it a laugh trying to mask something far deeper? That was the moment everything started to feel unsettling. Because if Jungkook's phone call had truly been nothing unusual, why was Taehyung's reaction so unexpected? Some witnesses said that after that moment, the entire atmosphere shifted. Taehyung didn't continue practicing. He walked to the corner of the room, sat down, and stared at the floor in silence. No one dared approach him. No one asked questions. It was as if everyone understood that something serious had just happened, but no one had the right to know what it was. Meanwhile, across the city, Jungkook remained in Itaewon, surrounded by people who likely had no idea that the digital world was already erupting because of him. This contrast became impossible to ignore. How could two people so close react so differently to what seemed like the same moment? Were they truly experiencing the same situation? Or were they standing on completely different sides of the story? Speculation intensified as more fragments of the recording were analyzed. The shifts in Jungkook's tone, the way he emphasized certain words, even the silence between his sentences, everything became material for endless interpretation. Some believed there was suppressed emotion. Others felt there was something deliberately hidden. But what shocked people most was not just the content of the recording itself. Because his reaction wasn't just surprise or confusion. There was something more complex beneath it. Something that perhaps could only be understood if the true context were known. A context that, to this day, remains a mystery. Did he feel betrayed? Had he already known about it? Or did the recording reveal something he never expected? These questions lingered, building layer upon layer of speculation that became increasingly difficult to untangle. And in the middle of it all, one thing became clear. This was no ordinary leak. Something that might change the way people see relationships, dynamics, and the reality behind what once seemed perfect on the surface. Observers began revisiting past moments with new eyes. Their last public interactions, subtle changes in expressions, even brief pauses during interviews. Details once overlooked were now being re-examined under a completely different lens. Were those moments just coincidences? Or were they clues that had been missed all along? And if this truly was part of something larger, then the next question became even more intense. What happens next? Will there be an explanation? Or will silence only deepen the mystery? In a world that moves at lightning speed, where information spreads in seconds, truth often becomes the hardest thing to grasp. And in this case, every answer seems to create even more questions. But perhaps that is what makes it so compelling. Because beneath all the speculation, beneath all the theories, one thing cannot be denied. This moment has created a narrative so powerful, so emotional, and so full of mystery that it refuses to be ignored. And as we try to piece together what really happened, as we attempt to connect the scattered fragments, we may begin to realize something unsettling. And yet, just when it seemed like the storm had reached its peak, something even more unsettling began to take shape. Something quieter, more subtle, but far more difficult to ignore. Fragments that were once dismissed as unclear suddenly became the center of intense scrutiny. Background noises were amplified. Breathing patterns were analyzed. Even the faintest shift in Jungkook's tone began to feel intentional, as if every second of that call carried a meaning that no one had fully uncovered yet. Listeners replayed the clip over and over again, each time convinced they had discovered something new, something others had missed. Was there another voice in the background? Was there hesitation before certain words? And why did it feel like the silence between his sentences spoke louder than the sentences themselves? At the same time, those who had witnessed Taeyoung at the training facility began sharing more details, small, almost insignificant observations that, when put together, painted a picture far more complex than anyone had initially imagined. One staff member recalled how Taeyoung had checked his phone multiple times before the music even started, as if he was already expecting something. Another mentioned how his usual warm interaction with the team felt restrained, almost distant. What made the situation even more intense was the timing between the two events. The call in Itaewon, the reaction at the training room, the gap between them, too short to be coincidence, too precise to be ignored. It created a narrative that felt almost scripted, yet undeniably real. A sequence of moments that seemed connected by an invisible thread, pulling everything together into something that no one could fully explain. Then came the theories. First, they were scattered, disconnected ideas thrown into the void of online discussions. But gradually, patterns began to form. Some believed the call contained a confession, something deeply personal that was never meant to be exposed. Others argued it hinted at a disagreement, something unresolved that had been quietly building over time. There were even those who suggested that what people were hearing was only a fraction of a much larger conversation, carefully cut and leaked in a way that would create maximum impact. But if that were true, then another question emerges. Who would benefit from such a leak? And why now? Because timing once again refuses to be ignored. This wasn't just any moment. It happened during a period when every move, every appearance, every word from Jungkook and Taeyoung was already under intense public attention. A time when even the smallest gesture could spark headlines. And suddenly, out of nowhere, a private call appears, just enough to disrupt everything. Too convenient? Or too calculated? Meanwhile, silence from both sides only fueled the fire. No immediate denial. No clarification. No statement that could ease the growing tension. Just an absence of explanation that felt heavier with every passing hour. For some, that silence meant nothing, it was simply a refusal to engage with rumors. But for others, it felt like confirmation that something deeper was at play. Because silence, in moments like this, is never truly empty. It becomes a space where assumptions grow. And in that space, imagination often takes control. But perhaps the most haunting part of all this isn't the recording itself, or even Taeyoung's reaction. It's what came after. Because in the days that followed, subtle shifts began to appear. Not dramatic enough to confirm anything, but noticeable enough to keep people watching. A glance that lingered just a second too long. A moment of hesitation before speaking. Interactions that once felt effortless now carrying an almost imperceptible weight. Were these changes real? Or were people simply seeing what they wanted to see? That question, more than anything else, became the center of the entire narrative. Because once doubt is introduced, it spreads. And once people begin to question what they thought they understood, every detail becomes open to interpretation. Even the past. Old footage was revisited. Interviews were reanalyzed. Moments that once felt ordinary were now examined under a completely different lens. A A smile that seemed genuine, was it forced? A pause in conversation, was it meaningful? A look exchanged, did it carry something more? It became an endless cycle of observation and speculation, each new theory feeding into the next. Possibility that what happened that night in Itaewon was not just an isolated incident, but part of something far more intricate. A story with layers that have yet to be revealed. A moment that, whether intentional or accidental, has exposed just enough to make people question everything, while hiding just enough to keep the truth out of reach. And maybe that is why it continues to resonate. And then, just when the narrative seemed to settle into a pattern of endless speculation, a new layer emerged, one that didn't rely on sound or even visible reaction, but on something far more unsettling: absence. Because suddenly there were moments when nothing happened at all. No updates. No appearances that addressed the situation. No indirect hints strong enough to confirm or deny anything. And yet, that very emptiness began to feel louder than any statement ever could. Fans who had been tracking every movement, every expression, every second of footage, found themselves staring at a void and trying to interpret it. The days stretched, but the tension didn't fade. Instead, it evolved into something more internal, more psychological. People began to question not only what they had heard, but how they had reacted to it. Was the recording truly as serious as it sounded? Or had the weight of the situation been amplified by the way it appeared? Sudden, unexplained, incomplete? Those who observed closely began to notice patterns that were almost too subtle to define. A slight delay before responding in conversations. A tendency to look away at moments when eye contact would have once been natural. Even his energy during practice, still professional, still precise, but carrying an undercurrent that felt different from before. And that change, however small, became impossible to ignore. Some began to ask a question that hadn't been fully explored before. What if the reaction at the training room wasn't about shock at all? Because there is a difference between being surprised by something and already knowing it was coming. If Taehyung had already been aware of the situation hinted at in Jungkook's call, then his reaction, the pause, the laugh, the withdrawal, takes on an entirely different meaning. It stops being a response to new information and becomes something else entirely. A response to confirmation. And if that were true, then how long had this been building? That possibility shifted everything. Because now, the focus was no longer just on the call itself but on the timeline surrounding it. The days before. The interactions that at the time seemed ordinary. The moments that passed without question, but now, under this new light, felt like pieces of a puzzle that had been quietly assembling in the background. Because while the recording captured his voice, it didn't capture his full context. It didn't show what led to that moment. It didn't reveal what he was thinking as he spoke those words. And perhaps most importantly, it didn't explain what he felt after. These questions lingered unanswered, creating a sense of imbalance in the story, because without his side fully understood, every interpretation remained incomplete. And yet, the story refused to fade. It lingered in discussions, in quiet observations, in the way people continued to revisit that same audio clip, hoping to hear something they hadn't noticed before, hoping that somewhere within those seconds, there was a hidden truth waiting to be uncovered. But perhaps the truth was never meant to be found in the recording itself, in the spaces between what was shown and what was hidden, because sometimes the most revealing moments are not the ones that are captured, but the ones that are withheld. And as time moved forward, one realization became increasingly difficult to ignore. Whatever happened that night didn't end when the call ended. Not in obvious ways, not in dramatic confrontations or public revelations, but in the subtle shifts that only those paying the closest attention could see. A change in rhythm, a change in tone, a change in something that had once felt unshakably consistent. And maybe that is what makes this story so difficult to let go of. Because it doesn't offer closure. It doesn't provide a clear beginning, middle, and end. Instead, it exists in fragments, moments that hint at something deeper, but never fully reveal it. Will it ever come into focus? Or will it remain like this, just beyond understanding, just beyond confirmation, existing only as a question that continues to echo long after the moment itself has passed? No one can say for certain. But as long as people continue to ask, continue to listen, continue to search for meaning within what may never fully be explained, the story will remain alive. And as the story lingered in that unresolved space, neither fading nor fully erupting, something even more unsettling began to surface, something that no one had anticipated at the beginning of this chain of events. The possibility that the truth, if it ever came out, might not bring clarity at all, but instead complicate everything even further. Because by now, the narrative had grown far beyond a single phone call. It had become something layered, something shaped not only by what was heard, but by what people believed they understood. And belief in situations like this is a powerful force. It fills gaps. It connects fragments. It creates meaning where none has been confirmed. But what if those meanings were never accurate to begin with? What if the entire interpretation, the tension, the assumptions, the emotional weight placed on every pause and reaction, was built on a foundation that no one had verified? That question began to quietly unsettle even the most convinced observers. Because the more people analyzed, the more contradictions began to appear. Some listeners insisted that Jungkook's voice carried urgency. Others argued it sounded controlled, almost calculated. A few believed there was vulnerability beneath his tone, while others were certain it masked something entirely different. The same recording, the same words, and yet completely different conclusions. How could something so specific feel so open to interpretation? And then there was the question of intent. Because intent changes everything. If Jungkook's words were spontaneous, then the recording captures a raw, unfiltered moment. Something real, something emotionally immediate. But if there was any level of awareness, any possibility that he knew he might be overheard or recorded, then the meaning of every word shifts. It becomes layered, strategic, potentially misleading. But without confirmation, both possibilities exist at the same time. And that uncertainty is where the tension lives. Meanwhile, Taeyoung's reaction, still one of the most discussed aspects of the entire situation, began to take on new interpretations as well. What once seemed like a moment of emotional rupture now appeared, to some almost restrained, controlled in a way that suggested not chaos but containment. As if whatever he felt in that moment he chose not to show it fully. And that raises a different kind of question. Not what did he feel, but what did he decide not to reveal? Because restraint is not absence. It is a choice, a decision to hold something back. And when that possibility enters the narrative, it shifts the focus once again. From what is visible to what is intentionally hidden. Some began to speculate that what happened in that training room was only a fraction of a much larger response. That whatever Taeyoung experienced in that moment did not end there, but continued in ways that were never seen, never recorded, never shared.